Every photograph tells a story, but some stories cut too deep to ever fade. What you're about to see are pictures so raw and painful that they continue to haunt generations long after they were taken. These are not staged portraits or art pieces. They are 8 of the most disturbing glimpses into everyday survival during the Great Depression. Each photograph reveals more than faces. It exposes everything people lost and the faint hope they tried to hold on to. The question isn't whether these images will affect you, it's how long they will stay with you. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1. Migrant Mother. A woman sits in the frame, her hands pressed to her chin, eyes staring beyond the moment. Around her shoulders, 2 children turn their faces away, clinging to her for comfort, yet hiding from the lens. This is not just one mother caught in exhaustion. It became the image of millions fighting the same hunger. At first glance, the scene looks deliberate, almost as though it were staged. Her gaze feels posed, her children arranged just so. But behind that stillness was the heavy truth of empty fields, failed crops, and hunger measured in days. Dorothea Lange found Florence Owens Thompson at a pea pickers camp. Her face was weathered from years of work, her expression balanced between fear and strength. The photographer captured not an individual story, but a mirror for the nation's anxiety. When the photos spread, it demanded action. Relief aid followed, proof that an image could move officials faster than words. What endures is not one mother's hardship alone, but the uneasy knowledge that suffering had to be exposed before help arrived. Number 2. Children of Oklahoma migrant workers. Imagine a group of children seated in a field, their bare feet covered in dust, their expressions carrying a weight far beyond their years. No toys in sight, no comfort of play, only the strain of families forced to move against their will. The dry earth and endless horizon marked the backdrop of their childhood, a world without room for ordinary joys. The Dust Bowl drove countless families from Oklahoma, chasing work that barely existed. For children, the journey meant more than leaving home. It meant becoming evidence of loss. Their thin faces, tired eyes, and worn clothes made them symbols of a generation uprooted by storms and poverty. In photographs, every shadow under their eyes spoke of meals skipped and futures uncertain. People soon labeled these families Okies, even though they sought safety within their own country. Those children, caught between hope and rejection, grew up marked as outsiders. What lingers now is not just their hardship, but the haunting silence where laughter should have been. Number 3. Dust Bowl farmers' families. Families sat inside wooden shacks as the wind rattled their windows. Outside, soil cracked under the sun, and storms of dust swept across their land. The earth that once promised harvest now turned against them, leaving homes coated in grit and lungs filled with particles of dirt. Farming had once been their lifeline. Generations trusted the ground to feed them, but the balance between human labor and nature collapsed. Crops failed, livestock starved, and entire fields disappeared into the sky with each storm. The betrayal was cruel. The same soil that gave life now stripped families of it. In one image, weary parents hold children weak from coughing, their faces tired, their clothes worn thin. These portraits carried more than struggle. They revealed the broken legacy of farmers who had counted on the land for survival. The myth of endless prosperity clashed with nature's fragility. Towns emptied, identities dissolved, and farms were abandoned. What lingers is more than dust. It is the sight of whole communities buried beneath storms, erased by their own soil. Number 4. Food line in New York City. In the middle of New York City, rows of men waited in silence. The line stretched along sidewalks, not for wages or contracts, but for bread. This was the financial capital of the world, yet hunger had settled into its very core. The scene carried an aching contrast. Towering stone buildings, symbols of wealth and power, loomed above. Below them, hundreds of men stood shoulder to shoulder, each hoping for the same small meal. The image stripped away the bustle of the city and replaced it with quiet desperation. When you look closer, the faces almost blur together. Individual names disappear, and the crowd becomes a single figure of need. In a place defined by ambition, men were reduced to waiting, anonymous among the many. The camera did not soften the reality. It showed the city's brightest towers, casting shadows on empty stomachs. The bitter irony remains. A nation promising opportunity showcased its failure in these lines. Bread became the measure of survival in a world filled with wealth just out of reach. Number 5. Evictions in urban America. Furniture stood stacked on the curb, mattresses sagged against lampposts, and children's chairs leaned on sidewalks like abandoned relics. For families pushed from apartments, the street became a stage where private lives were laid bare. Everything that once filled a home now sat under the open sky, exposed to neighbors, strangers, and the gaze of cameras. In cities, stability seemed closer, wages were higher, food markets were near, and apartments offered walls against the dust. But eviction notices struck faster than help. The promise of security collapsed when landlords, bound by debts too, forced families into the street before relief checks could reach them. Stability gave way to humiliation carried out in public. Photographs captured the raw scenes. Police escorting families down stairwells, mothers watching as their furniture scattered. Yet this story held more than despair. Neighbors often resisted, forming groups that blocked removals, chanting in defense, sometimes clashing with officers. Still, the result was often the same. Poverty was not hidden. It was dragged outside, stripped of walls, and displayed as another casualty of crisis. Number 6. Okie. Migrant camps in California. California was spoken of as a land of work, a place where fields stretched endlessly and jobs appeared certain. For families fleeing drought, the promise sounded like escape. Yet what many found when they arrived were camps of canvas tents, erected on dirt floors, crowded together without running water or sanitation. The dream of harvest gave way to the hard ground beneath them. Known as Hoovervilles, these camps held thousands who carried little more than blankets and patched clothing. Instead of stability, they walked into hostility. Local residents accused them of taking jobs and driving down wages, while employers exploited their desperation with pay too small for survival. The camps grew dense with people, but thin on dignity. Photographs show tarp shelters pressed tightly together, families cooking over open fires, children crouched on the earth. They reveal not comfort, but a fragile patchwork for life. In the end, the paradise they chased turned into mud and tarps. Survival balanced on scraps. Migration meant trading ruin for another ruin. Number 7. Starving families in the South. In the South, the Great Depression did not arrive as a fresh wound. It struck in places already marked by deep poverty and stark inequality. Sharecropper families lived in small wooden cabins with little more than bare boards, their survival tied to fields they did not own. Hunger was not new, but now it deepened, pressing against walls already thin. These households faced a burden heavier than empty plates. Sharecropping bound them to endless cycles of debt, while Jim Crow laws ensured that black families carried an even harsher share of the suffering. Poverty entangled with racial injustice, leaving entire communities with few lifelines when crops failed and wages stalled. Photographs from this era reveal stripped interiors. No stocked pantries, only makeshift meals ground from scraps. Parents looked on, hands tense, while children sat thin and restless. Relief arrived in some towns, but rarely fast enough and almost never equal. The images remind us that famine was not distant. It lived inside American kitchens, striking some families twice over. Number 8. Unemployed men sleeping in Central Park. Picture the lawns of Central Park, once the jewel of New York City. Instead of children playing or couples walking, the ground lay covered with men stretched out in rows, wrapped in rags, benches, and tree roots, serving as their only beds. This was not leisure. It was survival. Unemployment stripped men not only of meals, but of dignity. Sleeping in plain sight under the city's trees turned the park into a vast, open-air dormitory. The images show men reduced to shadows, their bodies hunched against the night, coats pulled tight as shields. What had been the city's place of escape transformed into a silent camp of the jobless. The irony stands sharp. A park built as a symbol of refinement and beauty instead displayed the nation's deepest wounds. For every man stretched across the grass, pride gave way to anonymity. With no walls or doors, the photographs remind us that survival in America's wealthiest city often meant nothing more than sleeping beneath the open sky. These 8 photographs are not frozen moments of a distant past. They remain reminders that security is fragile and that survival often left its mark on faces and streets long before the camera arrived. Each frame still speaks, showing us how quickly stability can collapse into hunger, dust, or loss. Behind every shot lies an unease that history alone cannot bury. Suffering leaves scars, and those scars ripple through memory. Refusing silence, the darkness of the Depression is no performance. It was lived. For more haunting stories from history, be sure to subscribe and continue exploring with us.